Welcome to the Recovery 101 podcast, everybody. I'm Dennis Farmer, your host, and today is a great day to be clean and sober. And if you're out there and you're still struggling, hang in there for a second. It's a great day to listen to some stories, some inspiration, some hope from some people who found solutions. And so recovery looks different for everybody. We know that. Listen into today's episode. Maybe you'll find something that will ring true to you. Remember, you can listen to the podcast on Apple Podcast, on Spotify. You can also listen to it on our YouTube channel or follow us on our social media pages on Facebook, Twitter, or TikTok at Recovery101. And with that, we're going to introduce today's guest. We've got Pastor Randy. I'm sorry, let me start that over. We've got Pastor Randy Q from Life Solutions. He's the founder and CEO of Randy Q Life Solutions. Randy studied at the King's University and Pierce College. He's a drug and alcohol counselor, and he's also the author of Pain to Power. It's a new book that's out that I think you guys are really going to be interested in. So let's turn the camera over here to Randy real quick. And Randy, I want you to tell us real quick, just a little bit about what led to Pain to Power, because that's the newest thing, right? So let's start back at the beginning. I mean, I know that you've got a story, and I know that you've got an inspirational story to tell. What was it like before any of this recovery stuff started? Where'd you come from? What was going on?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you very much for the gracious invitation, Mr. Dennis. It's good to see you again, buddy. And as always, it's an honor and privilege to be able to discuss solution-centered material content that'll help people along their journey and be successful in their own recovery. And I did write a book. The book been out for about 6 months now. The title is Pain to Power. The subtitle is How I Went from Damage to Destiny, because I believe that everybody deserves to discover their destiny amidst all the damage they had to endure throughout their life journey, really with addiction and even before addiction. And even in recovery, there's still times where life gets dark. We just have better tools to navigate through the uncertainty, to navigate through the pain, and I offer tools inside of my book to turn the pain into power, progress, and purpose. And a little bit of my backstory is I'm 52 right now. I will be 53 in about 3 more months. And I have 24 years clean, 24 years in about 7 months. I will be celebrating 25 years completely clean and sober. January the 20th is my clean date. So I'm coming up on 25 years clean. And I was born and raised down in East LA in all Hispanic community, William Meade housing projects, low income projects down in East LA. And my mother is a heroin addict, and all this is in the first 4 chapters of my book is all the backdrop story, and then the next 8 chapters is all solution focused, how to close some emotional doors that'll free you to experience life as you want to create it. And my mother's a heroin addict, my father's a heroin addict, Dennis, my brother's a heroin addict, and my grandmother was a heroin dealer for over 40 years. That's no joke. I'm not exaggerating. I'm not playing. It's all in the book, you guys. And it almost, the whole community, the whole family under the roof where I was growing up in, it was all drug related activities. So the chances of me falling into that lifestyle, following the footsteps of the one that came before me, were pretty high. And because it started off very young and I didn't have no real good, strong coping skills or mechanisms to go the other way, it was easy to fall prey to the environment or be a product of my environment. So that's the backstory in a jiffy, man. Is I followed the footsteps of my mom, my dad, my brother, and we scored drugs from my grandmother. Heroin is the drug of choice that ran through my whole family, and that's what my grandmother sold. And then through growing up around it, I ended up on the streets of East LA for many years, and all those years was a lot of incarceration, a lot of homeless, illness, a lot of pain, a lot of picking up hepatitis C, a lot of health complications. There's consequences that come with that lifestyle, and I've endured every single one of those consequences and all the pain that comes along with that territory. If you go to Africa, you're going to see elephants, giraffes, and tigers. It comes with the territory. You go to Florida, you're going to see alligators. It comes with the territory. While in drug use, the territory is many jail time arrests, many emptiness and loneliness and no direction. There's internal consequences, external consequences. So when by the time we get clean and sober, our work is cut out. But you got to keep your eyes on the result, on who you're becoming, on what you're going to be able to give. Why? This is one of my lines, Dennis. The more broken you were, the more people you reach. The more broken you were, the more people you can reach.
I like that. Let me ask you, when I don't know how, I don't think we've ever talked about how many different times you may have attempted, whether it was one or was it multiple times to get clean and sober. Was there one defining moment that was kind of like the culmination of all of these bad experiences, the consequences of the actions? Was there one moment, or was it a series of things that led up to you making the decision to finally change?
Yeah, that's a great question. When I said my grandmother passed away in July of 2004, and she has never changed her life. And my dad and my mother both got clean and sober. So my mother just celebrated, Dennis, 2 weeks ago, 30 years clean. Awesome. And my father passed away February the 14th, Valentine's Day, 2015. My papa passed away with 15 years clean and sober. So he experienced the last 15 years freedom and joy. Now, my father and my mother, they got clean one time with no relapses. Me, on the other hand, I relapsed for a period about 5.5, 6 years before I actually hit the ground running with my clean day after my clean day of January the 20th. Now, the story, all of my journey of darkness and pain when life was hurtful that led up into me getting clean. The last day using for me was not my bottom. There was definitely higher consequences, more painful moments of times in between my story. It wasn't the last day before I used or the last month or the last week that led to me getting clean. I've definitely had more hurt, pain, and dark areas in between time. However, it could have been a collective thing, but my bottom or pain was more internal. So it came now I understand that you don't have to hit an external bottom to get clean, although people do get clean that way. So hitting bottom is not doing 30 years in prison. Hitting bottom is not when you were homeless and you smelled. Hitting bottom is not when mom took the keys away or you lost your job. To me, hitting bottom is more of an internal deal where your soul is completely consumed by this disease that has its hands around it, and you feel completely lonely, isolated, no direction, just that emotional turmoil and pain. And that is more painful than anything external that I've ever experienced. And I've experienced some pretty painful things physically or externally, but my bottom was more internally. And I would probably answer that question by saying it was collective over time, not a one thing event that I could actually point my finger to that said that was the turning point, where mine was just a series of collective pain, and it was all internal. And I couldn't even talk like this or articulate how it went down until about 10 years into recovery. I didn't even look at when I first got clean, Dennis, it didn't even matter how I got here. What mattered to me was that I'm here, and what am I going to do now? And my intense hunger, my developed the starving, the hunger for a new way of life, the hunger for God, the hunger for the 12 step was so high and intense that kept me occupied to the point where I just kept going. I mean, the 4 step was helping me take a look at my past and to understand that I am a product of my past, but not a prisoner of my past. To take a look at my surrounding environments and how it influenced my beliefs, my values, my behavior. To take a look at all that, to cut it all loose, to discard it, and reinvent my identity moving forward with this hunger. And I am still hungry today for God, for recovery, to help people. That's an added element, to help people, be a blessing, add value to folks and God, and just to keep living, opposed to when I first got clean.
Let me ask you real quick, because that's, I think, an important thing for listeners to understand too. Two things you had mentioned there I think are important. One, you're obviously known now as Pastor Randy Q. So the first question is, when you eventually got clean and sober, was faith a part of that at that point, or were you really just kind of working a program of a higher power? You didn't have any clarity there. And at that same time, was it almost immediate that you knew in your recovery that you wanted to help other people, or did that come later?
Yeah, the first question, let me answer the first question. So I never, ever had a problem with God. I just thought God was impersonal, like out there. I didn't know God was out there and in here. I didn't understand that question. Is God external out there somewhere or internal? It lives in your heart. And to me, the answer is both. God is both omnipresent out there and very personal and wants fellowship and relationship and lives in my heart. Now, when I first got clean, so because I had no God issues in my story or my background, like blame God, there was a period where I cussed God out when I was real empty. A couple of times like that where I verbally screamed in the sky, "Yo, why you MFer? Why is my life?" I didn't know that a whole lot of it was my own fault. So when I got clean, though, I prayed and I was fine using the word God. I did not use the word Christ or Jesus, but I did use the word God, and I had no issue going to God because I knew that I had to do something different because I've been around for 5.5 years and I wanted to have a different approach, a more sincere attitude, and I had to show it. So I started praying more. I felt like there was a spiritual component aspect to life that cannot be denied, and that I needed that God push, that God factor. And I prayed and used the word God, and then at 4 years clean, I actually stepped foot into a church. So the first 4 years of my recovery, and they did 12 steps, did the trick. The first 4 years, prayer and 12 steps did the trick. And then at 4 years clean, there was something deeper drawing me. Dennis, something was calling me. There was a hook inside me. And I walked into a church, got saved, and immediately at 4 years clean, I heard a voice, not audibly, calling wise, like in my spirit, telling me that I was going to do something with ministry. And it was crystal. I was so clear as day, as like they say, that I was going to be a pastor. So at 4 years clean in church, from being led to the Lord and starting attending church at 4 years clean, I knew that I was going to become a pastor. I did not deep dive and look into it or answer that calling until I had 10 years clean. So for 6 years, I didn't want to give up certain behaviors. I felt like God was going to start asking me to do things I didn't want to do, but more important, he was going to ask me to stop doing things I still wanted to do. So I put limits on God, hoping he didn't put limits back on me. And at 10 years clean, I answered the call into ministry, and I had to do it in New York. I couldn't do it here in LA. Sometimes in life, Dennis, the dream in your heart is bigger than the environment you're in. You may have to make a move to fulfill your calling based on environment. And that it seems like you have a few factors, but you did that from California to Texas. But I had to leave the East Coast, the West Coast, LA, and go to New York City. So I left Cry Help in 2010, September the 18th, 2010, Saturday. I flew into JFK to start my ministerial training. And then I came back a year later and entered seminary at TKU, the King's University here in Los Angeles. And I did half of my education in person, and the other half was online because the mother of the school I went to, the King's University, the mother went from LA to Gateway Community Church in Dallas, Texas with Pastor Robert Morris. They went over there, and I had to finish my degree online. And I graduated in 2018, and I got ordained in 2019 and started preaching in 2019. Now, that was the first question. And I'm sorry, what was your second question?
It's okay. I actually have a follow-up on something that you had said in there before we get to the second one, and it's this. You had mentioned that 5-year period of kind of being in and out of the rooms. And one of the reasons I want to stop and highlight that for a second, I'm sure you hear this a lot, and I know I do in the work that we do all the time. People have a hard time believing those of us in the rooms are genuine when we keep telling somebody to come back. That we really aren't judging somebody because they've relapsed and they're having to come back. They have a really hard time, people who have not embraced recovery and they're making multiple efforts and they're relapsing. What do you tell people? How do you try and get across to people that that's sincere, that's genuine? The love, the support they feel in the rooms when you have to go back more than once or more than twice. What do you tell people about the sincerity of that and the value of it and that it's real?
Yeah, so the guys, the addicts and alcoholics that struggle in and out the rooms, and they have a perspective that there's an insincere keep coming back from people. Unfortunately, whatever experience they had prior or what they observed or heard may be true, because we got a lot of people in our fellowship who do take on judgment, who do give the 12 steps a black eye, so to speak. But there is a handful of us that walk like we talk and don't do anything that's immoral or lacks integrity, where love, forgiveness, and compassion is a hallmark to our personality and our style. However, we are far and in between. So when I do come across a client that does not believe in the genuineness of people in the fellowship saying keep coming back, number one is make them feel heard. You gotta believe them, man. Make them feel heard. They need to feel understood. If they're really hurting and they're upset, the last thing you want to do is give advice. The first thing you want to do is show compassion. So when somebody is angry or even upset or even in pain, they need empathy more than they need advice. So just old school arm around the shoulder. Let me take showing. The behavior part, showing, let me get you a hamburger, buy you cigarettes or a cup of coffee, and listen to them, and I'll be here tomorrow. So that first thing is to be an example, and then when their hurt or their anger kind of settles emotionally, that's when you have a better chance at inserting insights into them, saying, look, I know you've been hurt before, but look at the alternative, jails, institutions, and death. You cannot keep living the road you're going down, this way of life. These 12 steps and recovery piece have been proving itself in the life of others, and no, it is not perfect, and yes, there's people who do judge, but you got to make a decision. You can hang with me, and you will begin to find people who will genuinely and authentically be a helpful person to what your situation is. You got to walk through this. Plus, let's look at the positive side, man. I came to acceptance, Dennis, that there is just people who are not gonna approve of us or like us. Even if you're doing the right thing, there's still people who are not going to support us.
Yeah.
Some people are going to hate us for reasons, and some people will hate us for no reasons. Both are right here. So we need to focus on the people who are loving, caring, and supportive of us. So for me, God's will is to stay clean and sober through the 12 steps. I never left, even though I got a church. I'm a senior pastor of Recovery House of Worship, San Fernando Valley. I preach every single Sunday at 11:30 a.m. online. So I'll give you that information at the end in case somebody wants to jump in. Now, even with church going, I'm very much invested in the 12-step world. If you've been to one meeting, you've been to 1,000. One of the reasons that I keep coming back is to be a beacon now, to be a light of hope for the very reason you just mentioned, that there's a lot of skepticism and people who come and don't believe that they're accepted or that, he ain't really clean for 20 years. So there's a lot of that goes around, but there is some of us, man, that walks like we talk and want to genuinely be supportive and add value to people who struggle believing that keep coming back is real without judgment.
Yeah, and that leads right into what the second question was. Did you know from the beginning of your recovery that you wanted to help others, or is that something that kind of God laid on your heart? Or how did that unfold that you wanted to become a counselor? Obviously, I mean, you talked to us about the calling that you had to go into the ministry, but you spent a number of years as a counselor and working in the industry, and of course then being in the rooms and, like you said, having integrity and being genuine. Was that just in you from the beginning, or is that something that kind of you grew into?
Yeah. Well, that's another great question. Now, Brother Dennis, when I got clean, my desperation, my hunger for recovery and a new life was very high. The element to be a counselor or help people was not there right in the beginning. I just wanted change. And maybe about at 90 days clean, I started developing a desire to work in treatment. And it was so strong. This December will be 24 years I've been working in the drug and alcohol industry. I am still a drug counselor and work in treatment. And this December will be 24 years. At around 90 days, I was absolutely convinced there was no bone in my body that was hesitant or insecure. I was convinced you're cut to work in treatment at 90 days. And so at 90 days clean, I wanted to work in treatment and help people. And I didn't get a job in treatment until I had 11 months clean. So my first job was at Tarzana Treatment Center, and I worked for Tarzana for 5 years, and then I went to Cry Help for 10 years. And then the last 6 years, 7 years, I've been working in the private sector section of treatment centers, dealing with mental health and substance use disorder. Yeah. So at 90 days clean, I knew I wanted to work in the field. I didn't get my job until 11 months clean. But the first 90 days, I was just getting my legs right, just getting foundation, just filling up my cup, so to speak. You can't give what you don't have, man. In that first 90 days, I was just eating every piece of recovery literature, going to 2-3 meetings a day, going to conferences, unity days, man. I was up to my eyeballs in 12-step stuff. And the church thing didn't come to 4 years clean, but I was just eating. Then I started working in treatment.
Did you know? Well, let's fast forward to the book. So it's been out for 6 months now. A couple of things. One, how long did it take you to put together? And two, did you know that? How long did you know you wanted to write this book before it actually came to fruition?
Maybe about 2002 2012 or 2011. So I've been wanting to write the book for 10 years before I started actually writing it. The idea, Dennis, I get what you call God inspired concepts. And the reason I call it God inspired concepts is because I know me. My thinking is not that excellent, that brilliant, that intelligent. I'm selfish in my nature. And my capacity to do is this small. I still go in and out of struggling with self-esteem and little issues. So the God inspired concepts is anything that I do that adds value to society or creates positive change in the life of other people, I give the credit to God. Now, the book, and I got a string of accomplishments that I call God inspired concepts, including getting married and being a one woman type man, including stepping up and being a father, including going to New York to start ministry. That didn't come from me, including getting ordained and start preaching. That didn't come from me, including writing a book. That didn't come from me, starting a coaching program. That didn't come from me. So the book was in me about 10 years ago before I could even believe that I could go ahead and do it. So that was about 10 years ago. There was one time about 7 years into the idea where I actually did old school with a notepad and started writing about 7 pages into it, and then I put it in the kitchen cupboard in a cupboard in the kitchen, and it stood there for another 5 years. And one day, New Year's Eve. It was every New Year's Eve, Dennis. Me and my wife and my daughter, we have the same dinner every New Year's Eve, steak and shrimp. And then right around 11:30, we write out our goals as a family. My wife writes her goals, my daughter writes her goals. I sit here and write my goals. And then right at 12 midnight, we're praying. I have a praying family. We're on our knees. We bring in the new year on our knees. So after we pray and I'm laying hands on my wife and my daughter, we go over our goals list. So the goal that I put on my list in 2021 was to complete my book, because we were in COVID and it was a shutdown. So 2021, I came up with, I'm going to finish my book, and not just a goal, I came up with a strategy. And my strategy was simple, is I'm going to spend 10 minutes a day every day in 2021 until I complete my physical book. And it was all in my laptop. And I spent 10 minutes a day in the morning. So you got to become acquainted with your own habits where you know you got your best energy. My best energy is from 9 in the morning to 1 in the afternoon. My brain just bursts with all kinds of energy, and that's when I want to conquer my greatest task between those hours. And at 10 in the morning, I decided to spend 10 minutes before I do anything else to my book. And let me tell you something, Dennis, that strategy completed my book, because I had some mornings where my brain was cooking. My spirit, I spent 4 hours in my book. Other days, I had nothing. Other days, my brain had nothing for my book, but at least I was willing to stay for a minimum of 10 minutes staring at my computer. And it took 10 months of 10 minutes a day, and some days were 4 hours. It took 10 months to finish the original manuscript. And once I finished the manuscript, I did some practices that I learned, law of attraction, prayer, visualization. I started attracting other authors and even publishers, and I became got in cahoots with these guys. Yeah. And before you know it, bam, my book came out, Pain to Power.
One of the things that's fascinating about this, and I'm still a newbie compared to you. I'm coming up on 10 years old, and I still love listening to the guys with 15, 20, 25, 30 years, because it reminds me, I think when we get into positions where we have some authority, where we have some responsibilities, whether it's leadership in our families, leadership in our companies, and in our lives, those of us who struggle with drug and alcohol addiction, you said it wonderfully. We're selfish. We still have those tendencies. They haven't miraculously just gone away. It is a daily practice we have to engage in. And so when we get into these positions of authority and responsibility, we will let ourselves become impatient. We revert right back to that wanting instant gratification. And when we don't see the million ideas that go through our head, or the stuff we visualize, when we don't see those coming to light soon enough, we start getting frustrated too, like everybody else does. And it's a good reminder that whether you've got 1 week in recovery, 10 years, 15 years, 25 years, you will have those struggles. And leaning on the principles that we learn in recovery, from the 12-step principles to the biblical principles we learn in church, those are the things that get us through and remind us that ultimately we're not in control. We need to turn it over to our higher power.
Yeah, definitely, I agree with you. So I would advise people to go to their spiritual literature, the Bible, and their 12-step literature, and then get my book, you guys. Let this be a supplement to your guys' recovery. Now, I always say this, right? This is what I say, Dennis. I'm not sure if you ever heard me say this. I say this: addicts understand instant gratification, while your disease understands delayed gratification. Addicts only know instant gratification, but the enemy, your disease, understands delayed gratification. What that means is that your disease will use something on you today to take you out 6 months up the road. So every morning I wake up and I'm in prayer and I recommit my life to serving God. My disease recommits his life to taking me down. Every morning that I wake up and I recommit myself to working an active program of recovery, my disease recommits himself to taking me down. So the reason why I believe starting in the morning is sometimes your disease wakes up before you do. This is why when you open your eyes, you're already worried, stressed out, you're already complaining. And a morning routine is you're creating an internal environment that's going to support some good thinking. And that we got to get into some sort of habit or morning routine. Why? Because I don't trust my own flesh. I don't trust the devil. I don't trust my disease. I don't trust my thinking. I know that I'm weak in these areas. So I got to immediately go to the power, to God, and surrender my life every single day. So surrender is not a one-time event. Surrender is actually a daily thing. You stay surrounded, and you'll be grounded. So I do think that we're in a daily fight. I sponsored a guy who used to love surfing, and he used to go to Hawaii, Australia, Indonesia just to surf. That was the love of his life. And one time he found himself in a battle of a spiritual nature is what he called it. But what led into that was a breakup with his girlfriend. So something starts over here, and then it could actually lead into other negative thoughts over here, and you're over here. And we were talking about this very topic about how we get into the battle, and it's daily, and that you need to be armored up. And he asked me, he says, when do we stop fighting? I said, when you die. When you die, that's when the fight is over. Until then, you learn how to fight. Now, I've been doing this for so long where my disease, the enemy knows he cannot attack me through my spirit because I'm armored up, so he'll come in other ways. As simple as a cookie, because I'm diabetic. Dennis, a cookie could kill you nowadays, man. Well, but you want to stay armored up spiritually, and you'll have a better chance at other parts of your life that get attacked.
I wish that's something too people would take more heed of. Paul says all the time, I can't remember now verse and chapter, but we're to die to ourselves daily, and it is a spiritual battle. But what you just said about the enemy, whether you call the enemy Satan or whether you call the enemy the disease or whether it's all encompassing, it will come after you through your children, through your work, through your co-workers. It will find a weakness or a vessel to use to try and come at you And that's what catches a lot of people off guard because they expect the attacks to come right at them. And that doesn't necessarily happen. One of the things I want to ask you about, because I know time's a little short here, and you've got to get going here shortly. One of the things I want to ask you about, in all the work you've seen done over the years, we all have our various venues that we work in, and treatment centers, and organizations we help with, and individuals. Do you think that things have gotten better when it comes to the stigma that surrounds behavioral health and mental health and addiction specifically? Or do you think that there's still a lot of ignorance out there to where people believe it's a moral failing, that it's solely a character issue, and that it isn't a disease? Do you think that we've made any headway there?
That's a complicated question, and I have a complicated answer.
I saved it to the end.
I do think that we are gaining ground in terms of getting support from the medical world. I think we're losing ground from the church world. But as far as getting more and more support from professionals medically, I think they're starting to have our back and understanding or addressing the disease concept of addiction, that it is a disease. So I think that we are gaining ground and picking up votes, so to speak, in that particular area, that we're gaining more and more support. I think in the church world, one of the institutions that is the one of my professors at Bible college, he said the church is the oldest institution that's the hardest to change. And what he was talking about was different styles of things where we need to adjust and adapt to the changing times. It has nothing to do with your essence or your core beliefs. Your core ethics and understanding biblically, your core remains intact, but there is outward practices that we need to adapt and adjust to the changing times to be more effective in our style. So we still have a lot of churches that pull addicts out of recovery and say all you need is Christ in church, and that's true. It's just not for everybody. So the ministry that I have, I am a branch. The mothership or the mother home is based in New York. Yeah. That's why I had to leave LA and go to New York to train with the staff there. RHOW, RHOW. HOW is honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness, incognito. But RHOW is Recovery House of Worship. There's pastors and ushers and congregation where everybody goes to meetings on Monday through Saturday and come to church on Sunday. So I train with their staff because they have an approach that's a little bit different than the mainstream or traditional church. And what we believe is that we are not here to replace your recovery. We are here to enhance your recovery. So we believe that you can be 100% devoted to Christ and be 100% committed to your recovery and proceed to live life on that basis with a foot on each side. That your faith and your recovery is like two wings of an airplane. Neither side is more important than the other, and you need both wings to take your life higher and higher and higher. So I would like to see the church approach change and say, hey, maybe you are one of those addicts that do need to get a home group, go to meetings and get a sponsor, and then come with us on Wednesday for Bible study and then Sunday service. So I would like to see that happen, but I do believe as far as addiction becoming or getting accepted as a disease, I think it's wider in the medical world. Now, the last thing I want to say along the lines of that is the treatment industry, not the actual 12-step fellowship. The treatment industry within itself is starting to shift in its paradigm as well, from drug to more mental health, where mental health is starting at drugs and mental health is fighting for center stage, and it looks like mental health is going to come out on top in about another 2 years, where drug is going to take a back seat. When it was the opposite when I first started off in this field, and I seen it that way for the first maybe 20 years of my career, and the last 4 years I seen the battle, and it looks like mental health. I still work in treatment, and now they're offering more in their advertisements to bring in clients, and the money they're spending to train their staff is more geared towards learning mental health issues and how to treat best effective strategies for mental health, other than just go to meetings. And I am completely okay with that. I just want to help. I don't care if the primary is mental health, or the primary is drug, or the primary is spiritual. And because I'm okay with that, I had to get thoroughly educated and trained in all three categories: being a pastor, being a mental health professional, and being a drug counselor.
Well, Samson just released the newest national statistics on drug and alcohol abuse, and I think it's like more than 70% are dual diagnosed. So, and for those of us who have been through the rooms and been through treatment centers, whether we've worked in them, owned them, or been through them, or all of that, we know that there's always usually an underlying mental health concern somewhere in that mix.
Yes,
that is,
yes.
Even if it hasn't directly caused an addiction, it certainly has contributed to it. So
definitely.
I would love to get into more treatment center questions and stuff like that. So we'll definitely have to do this again.
A second podcast. Yeah.
You and I both, I think, know that there are some really good ones out there, and there's some bad actors out there that give everyone a bad name. So I would love to explore that. So, one of the things I think that's important through this medium is to be able to educate people when they're and their families when they're getting ready to make these choices and get clean and sober. So I would love to be able to do that again. I'm going to turn it over to you for the last couple of minutes here to mention anything else you'd like to mention, and then we'll go from there. So take us out of here.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mr. Dennis, it's been an absolute joy hanging out with you, kicking it with you. We had a little chit chat before the camera turned on, and it's good to see you, brother. You are definitely a success story. You're somebody, I like your energy, I like your style. I would like to become better friends with you, maybe do a second podcast in the future. I do want to say, though, about my book, and so my book is called Pain to Power, How I Went From Damage to Destiny, and Danny Trejo wrote the foreword. And if you could see, me and Danny Trejo are in the back of this book, and Danny Trejo, he doesn't just lend his name and his influence to anybody. He has to really believe in you and the cause. Now, the book Pain to Power is not an autobiography. I want to stress that. It is not an autobiography. Why? That don't make sense to me, Dennis. Why would I want to write a book just about me and put it out there? So my book is 50% autobiography. The other 50% are tools, teachings, and techniques on how to turn your pain into power. And I am developing a coaching program based on the content of my book. And let me give you guys a little taste right now. So I did some writing extensively on the topic of unfair suffering and unfair pain. I did extensive writing on fear. I did extensive writing on emotional healing. And what I want to say about emotional healing is this, is whenever you have a wound, no matter how far back it's from, your mom, your dad, your childhood, maybe you've seen a divorce, maybe you went through a divorce, maybe you were abused, maybe you lost money, maybe you kept moving town to town, you were a Navy kid, whatever maybe the wound is loneliness, maybe you felt invisible all your life, whatever the wound is, unaddressed wounds, your wound is going to open the door for the enemy to have access into your soul. And what the enemy does through an unaddressed wound right in your soul is tattooed to slap a lie right there. And a whole lot of us go our whole life through living from that lie. Nobody wants you. You're too broken. You'll never get married. You're not good enough. Somebody could call you big nose in the 3rd grade, and you'll be big nose all your life. Your dad can like your sibling more than you, and you picked up on that, and you go all your life. So, in my book, I give teaching techniques on how to heal. I'm coming up with a program because I believe you need another person to do the work with that knows, is competent enough to create a non-judgmental atmosphere for you to take off the mask and show me your life, so we could get in there and do some healing work on the emotional wounds that's going to free you to have a lifestyle of joy, of freedom, of impact for your remainder life. Now, I also did some extensive writing on fear, because that's the other thing is fear keeps you behind bars. Fear is there's chapters in here on fear, on healing. Fear will stop you. Fear will make you play small. And if you play small, you stay small. Fear looks a lot hairier and bigger until you turn on the light. And the light is the pen. The light is the ink pen. Coupled with prayer, and then you get to doing some work with somebody else, man. So my book has a lot of teaching tools and techniques that I believe people will find useful and helpful. It'll serve as a lifeline to get you out of something that you cannot get out of by yourself, man. I talk a lot about addiction. I talk a lot about treatment, a lot about faith, spirituality, emotional healing, fear, and then unfair suffering and unfair pain. And I think I start off by talking about unfair suffering has been a question of confusion for people of faith for thousands of years, that we have an entire book dedicated to that very problem of unfair suffering in the book of Job. And when we go to God, asking God the why did my mom die of cancer? Why am I broke? Why am I? And when we experience unfair suffering, it is natural and normal to question God, but God is not obligated to give us an answer. So when we have unfair pain and unfair suffering, and we take it to God and ask Him why, God doesn't give us an answer, Dennis, but He gives us an example in His Son, Jesus Christ. Because if anybody experienced unfair pain and unfair suffering, it was Christ. And what Christ did on the cross was for a larger purpose. So when I'm experiencing unfair suffering and unfair pain, believing that there is a bigger purpose involved helps me navigate through the pain and turn the pain right into power. So the power is a book. The power is a college degree. The power is to be present for my wife and my child. The power is to serve as a pastor, a counselor, or mentor to some kid who's on the wrong road and their life is all jacked up. The power is to give a message every single Sunday. That is the power. And let me end with this. So I preach every Sunday on the Zoom platform. The Zoom ID is 336-927-5154. Password 316316. Every Sunday at 11:30 on Zoom. I hope to see you there.
I tell you what, brother, that this is good stuff, and I pray that everybody who takes a listen to this will find something out of it and find some inspiration in it. Pastor Randy Q, everybody, the book is Pain to Power. We're going to put information on where you can find that, both on the screen, and we're going to take and put the information in our description. And I just want to thank you again, Pastor Randy. I mean, it's been a pleasure having you on here, and we hope to see you back here again soon.
Amen. Amen. Thank you so much for having me. Let's continue our friendship. Let's deepen it, brother. I do have another commitment right now, so I got to jump off. You can get my book on simple Amazon. Just Amazon it. It's $15 on Amazon. Amen. So thank you for that, for this incredible podcast, Mr. Dennis. God bless you, brother.
God bless you, brother.